In March 1998, on what seemed like an ordinary morning in the middle of a snow-covered forest, 11 tightly covered steel cages suddenly appeared. As people came closer, they could clearly hear scratching, low growls, and fierce howls coming from inside. At the edge of the forest, waves of shouting and intense protests erupted from local residents and ranchers. But Interior Secretary Bruce Babbitt stepped forward with determination, opening the cage doors one by one to release the wolves back into the wild. Some wolves stood still for a few seconds, sniffing the snow. Some crouched low to the ground. But then, all of them rushed straight into the forest, trying to get as far away from humans as possible. That same year, 2 more wolves were released, bringing the total to 13. But surprisingly, 28 years later, this effort still has not stopped. Every year, before dawn, the sound of helicopter engines can still be heard as wolves are released into the canyons. Hundreds of wolves now live across Arizona. Beyond conservation, what is their ultimate goal? And how can they keep both the animals and indigenous communities safe? The wolf species they had just released was the Mexican wolf, the smallest, rarest, and southernmost living subspecies of the North American gray wolf. Its grayish-brown coat, mixed with yellow, rusty red, and black, helps it almost disappear into the brush, rocky mountains, and dry, burning desert landscapes of Arizona, New Mexico, and northern Mexico. Most importantly, even though they are wolves, they are not dangerous to humans. For more than a century, no significant series of attacks has been recorded. In fact, they are more afraid of people. But that does not mean they are weak or timid, because this is still a top predator in the ecosystem of the American Southwest. Nothing represents true wilderness more clearly than the wolf and its haunting howl. But as more settlers moved into this region, ranches, cattle, sheep, and fences began spreading across the land. Mexican wolves soon came to be seen as humanity's #1 enemy. In 1915, the government established the U.S. Biological Survey with one clear goal: to completely eliminate wolves. Predator control campaigns turned killing wolves into a paid job. In just a 10-year period, more than 900 Mexican wolves were killed in New Mexico and Arizona by trappers or government collaborators. Guns, steel traps, snares, digging into dens to capture wolf pups, and poison were all used. Even Aldo Leopold, an important figure in conservation history, once believed in the thinking of that era when he was young. Fewer wolves meant more deer, more game animals, and the West would become a paradise for humans. During a trip in the Southwest, he and his companions shot a wolf. But when he ran closer, Leopold saw the last light fading from its eyes. That moment haunted him for the rest of his life, and he realized that his way of thinking had been wrong. Even so, by 1976, they were listed as an endangered species. More precisely, they had been wiped out from nearly the entire continental United States, except for Isle Royale National Park in Michigan and part of Minnesota. Do you remember the release event we talked about at the beginning? In fact, one of the people there was Aldo Leopold's granddaughter, Patricia Stevenson, who helped carry one of the Mexican wolves being reintroduced into an acclimation pen in the Blue Range. But wait, if Mexican wolves had almost disappeared from the United States, where did they get the wolves to release back into the wild? The answer lies in Mexico. From 1977 to 1980, the last 7 wild individuals, including 5 males and 2 females, were captured to save what remained of this subspecies bloodline. From those few remaining wolves, scientists began building an extremely strict captive breeding program. By 1998, 13 captive-born Mexican wolves were returned to the Blue Range. Beyond everything mentioned earlier, to keep the wolf population developing steadily, there was also an entire monitoring system: GPS, radio signals, aerial surveys, tracks, cameras, and breeding data, all used to understand how each pack was living, dying, moving, and recovering. But honestly, the story was not that simple. In the 4 mainly rural counties within the proposed release area, about 50% of surveyed residents supported the reintroduction, while about 32% opposed it. Biggs, 1,988, found that 79% of New Mexico residents statewide supported reintroducing Mexican wolves into New Mexico. However, 79% of New Mexico ranchers opposed the reintroduction, while only 21% supported it. The reason was still the same: they feared the wolves would harm them and their livestock. Even so, the program continued. the cages kept opening. The wolves were still fitted with collars, tracked, moved, and supplemented with new releases. Every winter, helicopters still cut through the canyons of Arizona and New Mexico to count them, capture them, check their health, replace their collars, and return them to the wild. From 1998 to 2023, the program continued releasing wolves every year. In total, 195 individuals were released in 67 different groups across Arizona and New Mexico. By the end of 2024, the Mexican wolf population in the United States had grown to at least 286 individuals. There is one important thing I still haven't told you. There was another reason why humans began speeding up the effort to move wolves back and forth. Do you remember how we said they are a top predator in the American Southwest? When Mexican wolves were wiped out, the American Southwest fell into a serious ecological crisis that scientists call a trophic cascade. Without the presence of a top predator, deer and elk populations exploded. Even worse, they no longer knew fear. Instead of constantly moving to avoid danger, they calmly stayed year after year in river valleys, eating every young shoot as soon as it emerged. As a result, key tree species such as willows, cottonwoods, and alders were pushed to the point where they could no longer regenerate. According to a striking study by two ecologists, William J. Ripple and Robert L. Beshta of Oregon State University, in areas where wolves were absent, riparian vegetation cover declined severely, with some places losing more than 80% of their young shrubs. Without tree roots to hold the soil in place, once green riverbanks suddenly turned into eroded, barren channels that collapsed after every flood season. Birds lost nesting sites, amphibians lost shade, and beavers, the architects of rivers and streams, also disappeared because there was no longer enough wood to build dams. The water changed from clear to muddy, killing native fish species. This complete collapse was what finally shocked the U.S. government awake. They realized that bringing wolves back was not an act of charity to save one animal species. So what happened after they returned to this place? The return of Mexican wolves to the landscapes of Arizona and New Mexico was not only a milestone for conservationists, but also a catalyst for deep, multi-layered changes across the ecosystem. The mechanism works like this. Because wolves are the main predators of deer and elk in these areas, their disappearance led to an increase in herbivore populations, because basically, there was no longer any species controlling their numbers. In turn, elk and deer actively feed on the leaves and young shoots of willows, alders, and cottonwoods, preventing these trees from spreading across large areas. They also browse on young trees, meaning trees that are still growing. This also limits the spread of vegetation. Now imagine the number of herbivores continuing to rise. The result was that plant life across large parts of Arizona and New Mexico became much poorer after wolves disappeared. In addition, it should be noted that herbivores were no longer afraid of being caught and eaten. As a result, to some extent, wild animals had turned into livestock. This is why, for example, river valleys began rapidly losing willows, alders, and cottonwoods. They simply could not grow fast enough, because elk and deer would come and eat the young trees. The same thing happened to other plant species, which had no room to develop because herbivores were no longer following their normal behavior in these regions. But when wolves returned, the behavior of herbivores changed dramatically. Instead of gathering in one area, hoofed animals began avoiding river valleys, where they were especially vulnerable to wolf attacks. This strategic retreat created major consequences for vegetation, because trees and shrubs that previously could not grow due to overgrazing now had a chance to recover. Their return helped stabilize riverbanks, prevent erosion, and make streams cleaner and more stable. It should be noted that the recovery of riverside forests provided beavers with the materials they needed to start building dams again, forming ponds and keeping the soil moist. As a result, groundwater levels rose, new habitats appeared for many animals that depend on wetlands created by beavers, and much more. A perfect example of the positive impact wolves can have on an ecosystem is Yellowstone, where these predators were actively reintroduced. According to research, before wolves were reintroduced, young cottonwoods rarely survived beyond 6 to 7 years and almost never grew taller than 6.5 feet. However, a few years after this animal returned, clusters of cottonwoods 13 to 16 feet tall appeared in some areas. What does this have to do with deer and elk? The issue is that this height marks a safety line, meaning it rises beyond the reach of herbivores that specialize in eating trees like these. When it comes to willows, their density across the floodplains of some rivers increased more than fourfold. At the same time, shrubs became noticeably taller and thicker, something researchers directly linked to elk spending less time in areas where these plants grow because of the risk of wolf attacks. There is also data on cottonwood trees. Before wolves were reintroduced, all young trees in river valleys were killed by browsing. But sometime after gray wolves returned, the average height of young trees increased 8 to 10 times compared with the period without wolves. Another thing we can thank the studies on wolf reintroduction in Yellowstone for is the data showing how this entire campaign affected the local beaver population after wolves had been eliminated. Did you know that in Yellowstone's Lamar Valley, before wolves were reintroduced, the number of beavers had hit rock bottom, with only 1 to 2 active colonies left because their entire food supply and dam building materials had been destroyed by elk? But when willows were rescued, the abundant supply helped the number of active beaver colonies surge to 9. When beavers returned, they tirelessly built dams, creating wonderful artificial ponds. These ponds kept the soil moist, regulated flood season flows, and turned dry, barren land into rich wetlands, a paradise-like home for hundreds of species of water birds, amphibians, and insects. In Yellowstone, after wolves were reintroduced, the number of coyotes also dropped sharply, with a very clear impact. Their numbers declined by about 50% in the first few years after wolves returned. At the same time, populations of hares, foxes, rodents, and even some bird species began to recover. For example, the numbers of snowshoe hares and deer mice increased, which was clearly confirmed through field observations. However, Yellowstone is different from Arizona and New Mexico. Even scientists say that comparing these two cases is not really fair. Still, Yellowstone shows that wolves are truly important animals for an ecosystem. These researchers also said that wolf reintroduction in Arizona and New Mexico may not achieve results as spectacular as those in Yellowstone, but it will certainly improve the condition of nature, which has lost a key element. There is definitely hope for the reintroduction of Mexican wolves, and some results have already been seen, even if they have not yet been fully documented. But things have not gone completely smoothly. Even more importantly, some of these problems are seriously threatening the recovery of this species. When the line between the natural and the human-made world becomes blurred, conflict is unavoidable. According to an official report from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, in 2024 alone, investigators confirmed that Mexican wolves killed 102 cattle and 2 horses, and injured 19 cattle, 1 horse, and 1 dog. In addition, another 33 cattle and 1 dog were killed by wolves. Put yourself in the position of the ranchers. Every calf taken by a wolf means thousands of dollars in lost property, along with hard work lost and an overwhelming sense of insecurity. On the other side, the killing of Mexican wolves has also increased. From 1998 to 2024, 314 Mexican wolf deaths were recorded within the recovery area. In 2024 alone, 30 wolves died, including 12 cases considered illegal and 5 caused by vehicle collisions. Even more concerning, between 1,998 and 2011, as many as 81% of wolf deaths caused by humans came from illegal killings. It is hard to say who is right or wrong in this story. Humans are protecting their livestock. Biologists are trying to save a subspecies from extinction. To deal with this difficult situation, the U.S. government had to bring out a special weapon, money. Yes, very practical. Every year, a budget fund of about $1 million is maintained to support non-lethal prevention measures and provide direct compensation to local people. The 2024 financial report from the Mexican Wolf Interagency Field Team shows that the total amount of direct compensation paid to ranchers in Arizona and New Mexico reached $171,371. Even though the number of livestock depredation cases in 2024 decreased by 11% compared with 2023, but even when they are not in conflict with humans, Mexican wolves are still facing an enemy they cannot survive against, their own bloodline. Remember, we started with only 7 founding individuals. The population can increase, but if the gene pool is too narrow, the population can still weaken over time through inbreeding, disease, reduced fertility, and threats to long-term vitality. That is why, starting in 2016, the recovery program began focusing more heavily on a very special technique: cross-fostering wolf pups. Instead of only releasing adult wolves, biologists take pups born in conservation breeding facilities and place them into the den of a wild wolf pack. The conditions are extremely strict. The captive-born pups and the wild pups must be born no more than 8 days apart, and all of them must be under 14 days old. In simple terms, they must still be small enough that their body scent is not too different, young enough to be accepted into the pack, and close enough in age that the mother wolf does not become suspicious. The process feels almost like a scene from a movie. Before dawn, conservation staff take the pups from the breeding facility, keep them warm throughout the journey, have veterinarians monitor them, and then fly them to Arizona or New Mexico. When they reach the wild den, the field team temporarily removes the pups already inside. The captive-born pups and wild pups are mixed together, DNA samples are taken, vaccines are given, tracking codes are assigned, and then they are placed back into the den. After that, the humans leave. The rest depends on the mother wolf. In the darkness of the den, the mother wolf does not know which pups came from a zoo and which came from the wild. She only smells a tiny litter of pups, the same age, with the same scent, all needing to live. If she accepts them, a new bloodline enters the wild without breaking the structure of the pack. In 2024, the program reached a record when 27 pups were placed into 8 wild wolf dens in Arizona and New Mexico. By the end of 2024, 13 cross-fostered wolves had been documented breeding and producing at least 30 litters. That proves this is not just a beautiful technique on paper. It is truly bringing valuable genes back into the forest. But even science is not enough when law and politics keep pulling the project in different directions. Lawsuits, debates over wolf release boundaries, ranchers' rights, the authority of conservation agencies to intervene, and the level of protection under the Endangered Species Act have kept the program in a constant state of tension. Restoring the Mexican wolf, therefore, is not simply about releasing an animal into the forest. The Mexican Wolf Recovery Project does not take place only on national forest land. An important part of the recovery area lies near, or passes through, lands with indigenous communities, including the Fort Apache Indian Reservation of the White Mountain Apache tribe. Because of that, this tribe is not just an outside observer, but a partner in the project. They work alongside the Arizona Game and Fish Department, the U.S., Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S., Forest Service, and USDA Wildlife Services in efforts to monitor, manage, and respond to situations where wolves appear on their land. If residents see a wolf, suspect that livestock has been attacked, or encounter an incident involving wolves on Fort Apache, the project has a dedicated hotline for reporting it. This shows that wolves are not just returning to the forest. They are returning to a land with indigenous history, its own management rights, cultural memory, ranches, local communities, and many different ways of seeing nature. But this story still has no ending. By the end of 2024, the Mexican wolf population in Arizona and New Mexico had reached a minimum of 286 individuals, with 60 documented packs, 26 breeding pairs, and 112 wolves wearing tracking collars. That is major progress, but it is still not enough to say the project is complete. Data through the end of 2027 will be extremely important because the 2027-2028 period is seen as a major test. Will the number of wolves continue to rise? Will the packs reproduce steadily? Will the genes from cross-fostered pups truly enter the wild population? Will the number of wolves killed by humans decrease? And will ranchers become more accepting of the program? If the answers are positive, Mexican wolves may move closer to the goal of long-term self-sustainability. If not, the project will have to adjust its management approach, because saving a predator is not just about bringing it back to the forest, it is about keeping it alive among humans. In the end, from the 11 wolves that stepped out of their cages in the Blue Range in 1998, this story has become a test lasting more than a quarter of a century. America once believed that killing wolves would make the West safer, richer, and easier to control. But when the howls disappeared, humans realized they had not only lost a predator, they had lost a key link that helped keep forests, streams, valleys, and countless smaller species in balance. Today, the Mexican wolf has returned, but its future remains fragile, caught between science, law, ranches, and human fear. What do you think? Should humans bring predators that were once wiped out back into nature? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy true stories about nature, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and follow the next journeys.